A Canterbury Tale. Like all great CEOs, though, Gregory was good at spotting opportunities to expand. The ecumenical patriarch business had convinced him that there was no point seeking to try to gain influence in Byzantium. So he went in the opposite direction, north and west, to Visigoth Spain and Frankish Gaul and remote Anglo-Saxon Britain. King Recared, Spain's Visigoth ruler, converted to Catholicism. The Frankish kingdoms, which encompassed modern France, Belgium, the Netherlands, northwest Germany and Switzerland, proved harder, mainly because they were a mass of brutal anarchies, and of course, although theoretically Christian, what clergy there were in those places were usually corrupt and useless. But Britain had possibilities. So in 597, Gregory sent a man called Augustine to the north. Augustine was a Benedictine monk, the prior of St. Andrew's Monastery in Rome, where Gregory himself had been a monk. Gregory put him in charge of 40 or so brothers and sent them on a mission to England to rescue Kent from paganism. And if you've been to Gillingham, you'll know what a big task that was. Bede, the 8th century monk who wrote a history of the English Church, tells a probably made-up story in which Gregory saw fair-haired Saxon slaves in the Roman markets and asked where they were from. When told they were Angles, Gregory uttered the worst pun in ecclesiastical history: "Non Angli sed Angeli," not Angles but angels. He really hadn't been to Gillingham. And there was a cartoon here about Gregory meeting the Anglo-Saxons in the marketplace. I don't know if that's at all clear. This one's saying they're also known as white Angles, and this single European market is not all it's cracked up to be. Anyway, Kent. Kent was probably chosen for a couple of reasons. A, it was convenient for cross-channel ferries, and B, King Ethelbert of Kent had recently married Bertha, the daughter of Charibert I, the King of Paris, and she was a Christian. So Christianity had what you might call an intro. Augustine wasn't particularly keen. He was more what you might call terrified. He and his group had only just left Rome when they started to hear terrible stories about the barbarian Angles. Some said they were cannibals. Maybe they mentioned Margate and Winkles. Augustine was sent back to Rome to ask Gregory to call the whole thing off. Gregory refused and sent Augustine back with letters encouraging them to persevere. In 597 they landed on the Isle of Thanet, which frankly is not a good start for any trip. But, according to Bede, King Ethelbert came to meet them and gave them lands to build a monastery near Canterbury. Ethelbert was converted, and Augustine became the first Bishop of Canterbury. There was a mass baptism of the king's subjects on Christmas Day 597. Hardy folk, these Angles. Gregory claimed to the Patriarch of Alexandria that over 10,000 people were baptised, but he was probably showing off a bit. Bishops were established at London and Rochester in 604. The event has been called the conversion of England, but that rather ignores the fact that good chunks of Britain were already converted, thank you very much. We know that British bishops were present at the Council of Arles in 314. Celtic missionaries hadn't done much to establish Christianity in Wales and the north. Mind you, the withdrawal of the Roman legions in 410 led to an upsurge in paganism in the southern parts. If you've ever had paganism in the southern parts, you'll know how nasty that can be. The invading Anglo-Saxons, themselves pagan, drove the Celtic Christians west. But these western regions, beyond the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, stayed largely Christian. So what we're talking about at this point was rather the conversion of Anglo-Saxon Britain. It may come as a shock to certain political parties who like to tap their Anglo-Saxon roots that the Anglo-Saxons were German immigrants and weren't Christian. Gregory typically had already made plans for organising the church in Britain. He instructed Augustine to set up 2 archbishoprics in London and York. Gregory probably intended for London to become the centre, but Augustine never transferred there. This may have been because London was not part of Ethelbert's kingdom, or it may have been the cost of train tickets. Whatever the case, he stayed in Canterbury, and when he died, around 604, he was succeeded by Lawrence, one of his monks, who had come with him from Rome. And that's how Canterbury, and not London, became the HQ of English Christianity.